to Storytime with Dave Booker. Today we're going to continue on with The Ledge of Creation by Steve Wolf. Appreciate you coming back. We're going to, we're right now in the pirate section. They've gone across on wooden boats because Mother Nature has picked one area that she likes to keep kind of like in the past. Everything else is getting modern by that town, and then they get on wooden boats and they're sailing across the ledge, and two boats have been waylaid. The crew have been taken out and pirates have been installed. Of course, Buckswat is behind it. So today we're going to continue on with chapter 16, A Team Captain Returns. So let's begin. The huge wide gully was a beautiful and majestic sight. Hold on one second, make sure. Yep, okay. The huge wide gully was a beautiful and majestic sight. Almost a fantasy. Water lazily cascaded over the tip of the ravine, forming a magnificent waterfall, a rainbow hovering in its fine spray. Birds swooped and dived in the evening sun past random trees that clung to the steep, precarious walls, their branches soaking up the last of the sun's rays. Many would consider it utopia, but not the foreign object that was falling at a lethal speed. It screamed and clung to its spike, the fast approaching valley floor now crystal clear to its eyes. Clayton Sneer would soon be spread over the floor of the gully like hot red butter. The team captain shrieked obscenities as he fell fast, but then something caught his eye. Something to his left, and that something was now on a collision course with him. Clayton looked down on the valley floor, now only 200 meters away, and closed his eyes and cried hard for his mother. But instead of the anticipated sudden painful impact followed by the spread, he felt a slight bump and his descent began to slow. The handlebars of his bike slid out from his hand and he was projected forwards. A motor buzzed in his ear. Gingerly he opened his eyes, looked around, and he discovered he was sitting upright on a yellow wooden model airplane that was being piloted by a very young child. His bike, however, had now reached the valley floor. Clayton watched in horror as it fragmented into thousands of pieces. He screamed as any cyclist would when their pride and joy has just been pulverized. Most cyclists would wish it had been them and not their loved one. But not Clayton. He was not that brave. As a small model plane putted out of the gully, darkness consumed the valley bottom and Clayton gave his bike its last rites. Time on the ledge is at present split into 4 zones, early, middle, late, and night. Clayton was still in the late time zone, but the rest of the teams were well into the night zone. And it was the darkness that Zodiac was thankful for. "Are you okay?" he whispered down the conduit. The two friends stared at each other and then at Zodiac, confusion spreading through their brains. Zodiac looked down at their puzzled expression. "It's okay. The pirate is out cold." "What have you done with his body?" Stan asked, afraid that the answer might be gruesome. Zodiac winked. "He's right here. I swapped clothes with him. I'm going to take his place so as not to arouse suspicion." Murray nodded his approval. "But what are you going to do with him now?" "Ah, that's your job," said Zodiac. Stan's face turned sour as if his King of the Mountain title had just been smashed on Strava by 10 seconds. "Our job?" "Yes, I need you to drag him into my room and put him in my bed and then administer this." Zodiac pulled out a small vial and dropped it down the conduit into Stan's hands. "What is it?" Stan asked. He swirled the blue bucket around and watched the spinning current die away. Zodiac sighed. "It's sleeping current. The sleeping potion." "Really?" Stan said, his eyes lighting up. "Does it work? Only I haven't slept in 15 years. One drop and you're out for up to 12 hours. Two drops and you're out for a day. Zodiac said as he looked around the deck. Stan pulled the vial closer, his eyes growing larger. Can I have some? Once our friend here is comfortably in bed, the rest is yours, only you must be disciplined with it. Stan licked his lips at the thought of a full night's sleep. We better get moving, said Zodiac. Just one more thing, said Barry whispered. Why are you doing this? Zodiac smiled a rather smug grin. I received instructions from McCrow a couple of hours ago. Now, here's my door key. Instructions for what? Barry asked, catching the key. Intervention, said Zodiac. A flicker of light in the distance caught his attention. Come on, we're out of time. Zodiac slid the near-naked body of the pirate down the conduit and replaced the hatch. Stan and Barry held their breath as the sound of footsteps approached. The footsteps stopped, small particles of dust fell onto their heads. The hatch complained and groaned under a heavy weight, and voices filtered down to them. The muttering continued for a few seconds and then tailed off as the footsteps moved away. On deck, Zodiac let out a sigh of relief. His disguise had worked. He was now the Night Watch pirate. Relieved, Barry inched the sleeping pirate along the horizontal conduit with Stan pushing. I hope he doesn't wake up, said Stan. Barry nodded, his foot formed on his brow as he struggled on. You better keep that potion handy. This is going to take a while. Stan nodded in agreement. Inside the bunk room, Colin was quizzing Reg about his predicament. So, you can't remember anything? Colin asked, chewing on a lion bar. Reg was still writing a note to himself and didn't look up. I remember you, Paul. Colin thought for a moment. If you cracked your head for a second time, maybe your memory might come back. Maybe. But I might forget my plan, Reg said as he carried on scribbling. Are you sure you have no urge to howl or crawl round in long grass, said Colin. Reg placed his pen on the bed and looked up. Paul, I really have no urge to howl, and I honestly have no idea why I would. And crawling around in long grass? He looked around the room at the faces peering intently at him. Listen, I know who I am. I know all of you, but for some strange reason you all have odd names that I don't recognize. I mean, Paul here. He is Paul, not Colin. Colin frowned, but Colin is my real name. No, it's not. Your name is Paul, and over there is Adam, Craig, and Mark. And my name is Steve, period. Derek could sense Reg's frustration building. Do you want your memory back? He asked softly. Well, I don't know if I do. I really do not care to howl or crawl around the grass. Why on earth would I want to do those things? Why did I do those things? Reg stared at Reg for a moment. Derek stared at Reg for a moment. Because they're what make you unique. You're just plain old Reg now. Sorry, I mean Steve. Reg looked thoughtful for a moment. Maybe. He picked up his pen again and carried on making notes. A loud noise from above broke the silence as a half-naked pirate fell through the hole in the ceiling and hung upside down, swinging gently. Bernard reached for his Diablo, loaded it, and aimed with the coolness of a polar bear. Derek, however, fell back onto his bunk. Austin screamed, and Colin found his buttering knife. Reg did not even flicker. He was still scribbling in his pad. Reg, there's a pirate, said Derek in a loud whisper. Reg slapped his notepad shut and placed it under his pillow. He turned to the dangling pirate and then to Derek. Adam, what have we just been talking about? Derek looked confused. Names. My bloody name is Steve. If my mother had christened me Reginald, I would have left home and paid for a new identity. Derek blinked and nodded towards the pirate. Reg followed his gaze. It's a sleeping pirate. Most likely he's been knocked out. I presume it's something to do with Jonathan and Alan. Muttering filtered down from the hole in the ceiling. Can you help us get him down? Barry said from behind the pirate's rear end. Derek stood up and Bernard disarmed his Diablo. They reached up into the hole and pulled the pirate down, laying him on the floor. Stan dropped the rope through the hole, and it landed with a thud and coiled up on top of the stricken pirate. He followed the rope out of the hole, hotly pursued by a sweaty Barry who replaced the loose panel. "It's too bloody hot in there," said Barry, wiping beads of moisture from his brow. "It would appear so, Jonathan," said Reg, handing him and Stan a towel each. Derek poked the pirate with his foot. "So, was a pirate a free gift with the rope?" Barry wiped his brow for a second time. "He came compliments of Zodiac." "Really? Why do we need a half-naked, unconscious pirate?" said Reg, looking up at Stan, and who was back on the beams doing pull-ups. "We don't. Zodiac knocked him out and ordered us to put him in his room," Barry replied. "And where's Zodiac now?" Derek queried. "He's disguised as a pirate on the deck. Zodiac gave us his room key and a weird sleeping potion." Stan reached into his pocket and pulled out the vial. "Catch!" Reg caught it and swirled it around, examining the blue liquid. "Curious. I think we'd better hurry," said Barry. "He may wake up at any time." Reg turned towards the door, then stopped. "And how do you suppose we open our door? Does Zodiac give you instructions on how we unlock the padlock on the other side of our door?" Barry and Stan looked at each other. "Never thought of that," muttered Barry. Said Stan. "Well, he'll have to stay here then," Reg said. "Where?" said Barry, looking around at the occupied bunks. Reg looked around at his teammates. "Any volunteers?" The teammates looked at one another in awkward silence. "Can't we just leave him on the floor?" said Austin. "Look, we could push him under Colin's bunk." Reg looked up at the gap between Colin's bunk and the floor. "Under the bunk he goes then," said Reg, taking control of the situation. Derek watched in silence, happy to let Reg take control. He was more astonished and intrigued than bothered about who was in charge at the moment. But sooner or later, he wanted his command back. "How much of this potion do we give the pirate?" "A drop. Or was it 2? said Stan from above. "Okay, we'll give him 2 drops to be safe." Team Cogs and Clocks collectively held their breath as Reg unscrewed the small cap and squeezed the rubber tip, drawing the blue liquid into the pipette. Holding the tip over the lips of the sleeping pirate, he squeezed 2 blue-tinted droplets onto the pirate's lips. The pirate's eyes sprang open, and he wasn't happy. You get a drink while we're in the middle of a paragraph here. Oh, that's hot. The yellow wooden plane zipped along the valley floor, gained height, and shot through a gap between the smooth rock faces, embracing the open sea shimmering below in the moonlight. The little pilot mashed the throttle, and the plane climbed around 400 meters above the sea and leveled out. Clayton Sneer clung onto the bodywork with both hands, wincing as a splinter dug into his palms. He had never really appreciated anything in this life, and now he was appreciating being alive. As the yellow flying contraption with its single propeller engine soared above the waves, Clayton looked back, scanning the coastline that he had just crossed. He could just make out faint glimpses of light, possibly firelight. He shivered. The air temperature had dropped sharply, and a crispy breeze was blowing into his angry face. Clayton looked up at his juvenile pilot. "Oi!" he cried, his lip curling into a sneer. "You there! Where are we going?" The young pilot ignored the question and continued flying his aircraft. They had been airborne for hours, and the pilot had ignored him throughout the entire journey. Clayton clenched his fists and slammed them down on the wooden fuselage. It didn't help that his bottom had gone numb. He shuffled awkwardly in his seat, but the fear of falling off was overwhelming. His teeth chattered 10 to the dozen in the icy wind, and his bloodshot eyes bulged as he looked up and glared at his captor. I asked you a question, he screamed, frothing at the mouth. The pilot slowly turned his head and looked at Clayton. Clayton gasped in horror. The remains of a jam sandwich clung to the corners of the mouth, and his very own pilot, of his very young pilot, and a small gob of the sticky red stuff was hanging from the tip of his nose. Nearly there, mister, replied the young pilot in a squealing, unbroken voice. It sounded like a train wheels binding on the rails going around a tight curve. Turning back towards the first strands of light on the horizon, they had been flying all night. Before Clayton could react, the young pilot nosedived the plane towards the sea, leveled out at around 50 meters above the waves, pulled the throttle back, and spun the plane upside down. Clayton fell like a lead balloon. Bye-bye, mister, and you're very welcome. Clayton plummeted in the dawn sky, screaming like a hyena. On board the LS Splinter, Moore's hammer forced his huge frame through the narrow corridor and knocked on Buck's Wad's door, the wooden panels buckling under the onslaught. Come in, Morris, said Bucks, rolling his eyes, well aware of who it had almost smashed his door down. Report. Morris cleared his throat and straightened his tight suit. My plan seems to be working. Bucks Wad sat down on the chair next to a wood-burning stove and picked up a tiny scroll of paper that had just arrived with a crow. Mother Nature is not happy. She knows something is wrong, and we don't have much time. Morris screwed up his face. I thought Mother Nature never intervened in ledge affairs. No, she doesn't, but that doesn't mean she can't bend her own rules from time to time, does it? Morris frowned and scratched his head. Buck sighed. She has a friend who can help. Like who? Bucks tossed the paper onto the table. Morris was a handy enforcer, but his brain really lacked what his bulk had to offer. I'm guessing Zodiac and Starlet. Why would she tell you this? Said Morris, unaware he was really annoying Bucks. It's a warning. She's warning me that she knows. Your plan may well turn out to be the disaster RJ predicted, said Bucks, slamming his hand down on the table. Morris fell silent for a moment, and tiny wisps of smoke appeared from his ears. So, what do we do? We play along with the hope we can make this look like it's not cheating. Joseph states that we'll be receiving a package very soon. What kind of a package? Buck sighed again. I do not know, but keep an eye out for anything unusual. Morris nodded and turned to leave. And where do you think you're going? Cookery class. And the hulking frame of Morris squeezed through the doorway and disappeared into the corridor. Bucks sat up in the silence for a moment, anger filling his eyes. Leaping out of his chair, he screwed up the message and threw it into the stove. I will win the next stage, he muttered, if it's the last thing I do. Grab his legs! Colin dived onto the pirate's legs as Austin and Derek grabbed an arm apiece, pinning the crazed sea dog to the floor. Bernard fired off a ball bearing, hitting the pirates sweetly on the head, momentarily stunning their raging guest. What's going on? Said Reg, trying to keep the noise down. I thought this was a sleeping potion, not a very strong mad pirate potion. Dan looked down from the rafters. Zodiac said it was. Maybe it takes time. Woohoo! He said, landing on the pirate's chest, keeping him down. Reg took a closer look at the vial and found some small writing at the bottom of the label. He squinted his eyes. Warning, may cause a sudden episode of rage and anger. Derek grunted, the pirate's arm flailing around as his grip tightened. Say how long this will last for? No. I know, said Barry, pushing past Derek. He sat down on the pirate's head and farted. That should knock him out. The scurvy sailor's arms went limp, but Team Cogs and Clocks looked at each other. Seconds later, they started to twitch. Okay, maybe it won't. The parrot took a deep breath in and raised his arms off the floor, defying the vice-like grip of Derek and Austin. Bernard fired off another ball bearing, but the parrot flicked his head to one side and dodged the incoming projectile. Trembling as fury filled his body, the pirate threw up his arms, tossing Derek, who smiling as he had just thought of a joke, and Austin across the room and knocking Barry into a wooden bulkhead. Reaching for Stan, he grabbed him by his chest and tossed him over his head. Count, who was still holding the pirate's legs down, looked at his teammates lying in crumpled heaps. The pirate smiled at him, kicked him off with ease, and pulled himself to his feet as Count smashed into the beams above. His buttering knife embedded itself in Reg's bunk post with an amusing boing, boing sound. Bernard fired off 2 more ball bearings, hitting their now raging guest in the head and momentarily stunning him again. Seizing the opportunity, the powerhouse pounced, hitting the pirate hard in his chest and knocking him backwards against the tiny back wall. But, like a wrestler, the pirate rebounded off the wall and plowed straight back into Bernard, knocking him to the ground. The pirate's eyes glowed a fiery red. "Arr, I'm going to kill you all," he growled, grabbing Bernard by the throat. Stan picked up a chair and smashed it over the pirate's head as Reg lunged towards him with a kick. Barry went in with a punch, but the pirate's vice-like grip tightened around Bernard's throat. Bernard's eyes bulged and his face turned red. In desperation, the team rained down on the pirate's head and hands with whatever they could find. Cowan dropped from the beams and kicked him square in the jaw, but the pirate barely flinched. His hands tightening around Bernard's neck as Bernard started to turn blue. The desperate teammates clawed at the clamp-like hands around their comrade's neck. With only seconds to spare, the pirate's hands went limp and he fell to the floor on top of Bernard, who coughed and spluttered as Reg pushed the pirate off him and rolled him away. Austin guided Bernard towards the bunk. I think the potion finally decided to act in accordance with what it is designed to do. Poking the pirate, who was snoring loudly. "You okay, Bernard?" I'll be fine," said Bernard in a hoarse whisper as he lay down. Derek shuddered as he watched Bernard nursing his red neck, the imprints of the pirate's fingers clearly visible. It was lucky the potion had kicked in when it did. The financially invested captain looked around at the shocked faces of his teammates. After what they had just gone through, fighting a drug-stimulated mad pirate, there was really only one thing he could do. "What do you call a pirate on drugs?" The shocked faces of the team turned to their leader. "Hut!" For several seconds, blank faces stared back at him before they all burst into roaring laughter. Not at the joke, but at the situation. Only Derek could have timed the one-liner to perfection, and only Derek could have got away with it. Excuse me. Here's my own pirate joke. Why couldn't the pirate get into the movie? It was rated R. All right, sorry. For several seconds, okay. Once the adrenaline had died down, Derek turned to Reg. "Time for stage 2 of your plan, Reg. Sorry, Steve." "Yes, Adam, I do believe that the time is right," said Reg, grabbing the hammer and nails. "Alan, please can you get some of that rope and follow me? We'll only need around 2 8-meter lengths. Jonathan, please can you nurse Mark back to full strength? We'll need him soon." Barry stared at Reg and then at Bernard. "I need the toilet, and besides, I'm not a nurse." "My dear Jonathan, I'm sure you can control your bodily functions for the moment. From what I've heard, you do like to wear the odd nurse's outfit behind closed doors." Mary turned her shade of purple as Reg clambered onto the hole of the ceiling with Stan trailing behind with the rope. "Good luck," Derek said as they disappeared out of view and replaced the loose panel. Mother Nature was very particular about which direction the morning sun clambered over the horizon, and more importantly, where it was positioned at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. During the early days of the ledge, the blazing ball of life shone its rays on the front garden of Mother Nature's cottage during the afternoon. Thus, when she was having a cup of tea in her back garden with Frango, she was never able to enjoy a warm setting sun. After 100 years of moaning about it, the mother of the ledge decided that if she spun the ledge on its axis a full 180 degrees, she'd be able to enjoy her early evening tea while watching the red sphere of fire as it disappeared over the edge of the ledge. Frango somewhat disapproved of her actions and did wonder why she couldn't have just moved to the front garden. And now the same sun was up, not showered or dressed, but partway through its daily cycle nonetheless. Its rays beating down on the sea of biscuit as the LS Splinter cut through the calm waters. Heading towards Mother's Landing, now only 3 days away. At the stern, enjoying a fresh cup of coffee, Buck's Wad reflected on life as the glow of the sun warmed his face. The sun filled him with a degree of jubilation that he would never admit to anyone. But even though he had seen it thousands of times before, he never got bored of the spectacular sight. Turning away from the sun, he looked down at the small table next to him where 2 crows with messages attached to their long black legs flitted about in a cage. As he unfastened the little door, the crows squawked and hopped around for a little while and then flew off into the distance. Bucks watched them until they were no more than little black dots, finally disappearing out of sight. Lifting his cup, he finished the last remaining dregs of his coffee and placed the empty cup back on the small table. A frown passed over the Administrator General's face, disappearing as quickly as it arrived. He hadn't given a single second thought as to how Clayton Sneer was doing. He then remembered he didn't care, although he did wonder what had become of the little idiot. A strange screaming filled his ears, breaking his reverie. Turning towards the noise, Buck squinted out to see where he could just make out a figure falling from the sky about 300 meters from the stern of the ship. A very familiar figure. Clayton? Clayton Sneer entered the cold water of the sea with the grace of a brick, plunging to around 10 meters in depth before coming to a stop and swimming back to the surface. He coughed and spluttered, spitting out a mouthful of salty water as his angry face broke the liquid barrier. Gasping for air and thrashing around like a fish on land, he spotted the LS Splinter and waved frantically. "Oi! Over here! Help!" A voice from behind him stopped him in his tracks. "So, you finally escaped the dwellers." Clayton spun around in the water. Sitting in the world's smallest wooden boat, which was listing badly, was a huge bulk of Morris Hammer, his entire lower frame filling the tiny space. "Well, yes, obviously. That may explain why I'm here," said Clayton, trying to puff out his chest while still treading water. Morris ignored the sarcasm, and his face remained static, maybe because he had few facial expressions. He stared at the helpless figure, fighting to stay afloat. "Well, help me," Clayton demanded. "Is there any reason why I should?" said Morris, his voice reverberating through the water. "Yes, I might drown." Morris smiled. "No, I wouldn't lose any sleep if you did." Clayton exploded with rage. After everything he had been through, he had had enough. "You big, stupid ape! Did you row that boat out here just to mock me?" Morris raised an eyebrow and smirked as Clayton slapped the water. "No, I just wanted to watch you suffer." His lip curled and he glared menacingly, his steely stare almost pushing Clayton under the water. "And call me a big, stupid ape one more again, and I will crush you with one hand." Clayton gulped. He looked out across the waves that stretched to the horizon and back at the giant henchman sitting in the safety of the little boat. "Look," Clayton said, his tone softening, "I'm freezing here. Would you please allow me to onto your boat? Nope, I'm big enough, so came the rumbling reply. But I'm going to drown. As I said earlier, I'll not lose any sleep over it. Clayton's eyes widened and his breathing quickened. He was tiring and slipping under the waves. However, Morris added with a smile, appearing to relish Clayton's fear, Administrator General Bucks Wads wants you alive. There was a long dramatic pause. For now. Anyhow. A little more. Clayton smiled a wan smile and looked up at Morris with big eyes. So can I please get into your boat then? Morris stared back at Clayton. You really don't listen, do you? There is no room. Clayton gritted his teeth. So how exactly are you going to rescue me? Morris smiled his toothless grin, reached behind and pulled out a long piece of rope. Attaching one end to a cleat on the little boat, he threw the other end into the sea. Hold on to this. The rope hit the water with a slap, and Clayton reached out and grabbed hold of the end. Not at all happy with the way things were progressing. He was about to protest when a sudden surge in forward momentum almost pulled his arms from their sockets, knocking the wind out of his complaining sail. Waves of salty water splashed into his mouth, choking him as Morris' huge arms, holding an oar apiece, swung into rowing motion. Pumping like a locomotive, his hands blurred, and the little boat was propelled across the water at a speed it was clearly not designed to do. Clayton swung from one side to the other, behind the boat, like a rag doll as he bounced across the waves. Catching sight of the LS splinter through salty, bloodshot eyes, his heart leapt with joy. His ride was almost over. Morris turned the little boat hard to starboard and stopped. Clayton, however, didn't. Maintaining the same momentum, he smashed headfirst into the hull of the galleon, cracking his cycling helmet. Looking up, Clayton saw two sets of outstretched arms coming towards him. The deckhand pulled him up and tossed him onto the middeck. He groaned and shook his head. Coming to after a couple of minutes, he sat up, took off his helmet, and examined it, shaking his head. The deckhands hauled the little boat out of the water and were securing it on the middeck when the huge frame of Morris appeared. Look what you did to my helmet, Clayton moaned. He looked like a poor man's cyclist, dripping wet, ripped clothes, and a cracked helmet. Morris shrugged and turned, the boards under his feet protesting under the weight of his bulk. Follow me, he said, and headed into the superstructure of the ship, the wooden staff droning as they descended into the bowels of the boat. Where are we going? Don't you want to see your teammates? Clayton's head exploded in a fit of rage. Those tosspots! They bloody left me in that tunnel. Morris grunted and opened the door that led into a short, narrow corridor. At another door, he pushed it open and shunted Clayton inside. Once his eyes had adjusted to the low light, Clayton saw he was in the mess room. The men who were lounging around drinking, eating, and generally having a good time were, in fact, his teammates. They were dressed in casual clothes and looking relaxed and happy. He, on the other hand, was standing by the door, dripping wet in tatty cycling gear and holding a cracked helmet in his hand. Steam began to escape from his ears as he slowly turned red and started to shake. Anticipating what was about to go down, Morris pulled up a ringside chair and settled down with a smile. Could you pass me the hammer, please, Alan? Stan looked around, wondering who Reg was talking to. Alan, the hammer, please. Seeing no one else in the tiny space, Stan picked up the hammer and passed it to Reg. Squeezed inside the narrow conduit, the two men watched as the tiller turned occasionally as the helmsman corrected the ship's position. Reg took a nail and hammered it deep into the thick, strong wood. He repeated the procedure on the opposite side of the post and knotted one end of the 2 8-meter lengths of rope to each nail and spread the ropes out along the floor of the conduit. Stan, who had shuffled further back, watched with a confused look. And how is this supposed to help us? Ellen, trust me, Reg said, and winked. He try work reading these things, so hold on a minute. Oh, trust me, Reg said, and he winked, which Stan found rather uncomfortable in the confines of the small conduit, so he crawled back to their room, Reg following close behind. That was Mark, Reg said as he dropped out of a hole in the ceiling. Derek met him as he fell to the floor. He's having a kip, but I think he's going to be okay. Good, we need to put our operation into motion very soon. Derek pursed his lips and sighed. Come on, out with it, Adam. Derek took a deep breath. And me and Austin have been talking, and we were wondering how exactly you plan to fool the helmsman that we're going in a different direction. You mean Craig? What? You called Craig Austin for some strange reason, said Reg. Derek scratched his head. Did I? Yes. Oh. Reg smiled and put a hand on Derek's shoulder, but don't worry, I've already thought about that. And he turned towards Austin with a smile and smiled with a wolfish grin. Suddenly, Austin felt uneasy. Craig, I noticed a few days ago that you put some objects away in your drawer. Reg pointed at the small chest of drawers in the corner. And, said Austin, I do believe one of those objects was your bike computer. Yes, it was, Austin said, looking a tad worried that he may have put other private items in the drawer that he thought would be safe from prying eyes. Reg continued, and for reasons only known to yourself, you removed the magnet that your sensor picks up from your wheel. Astonished that anyone had noticed, Austin nodded his head. Reg held out his hand. I will need that magnet. Austin, dumbfounded, opened the drawer, reached inside furtively, and removed a small wheel magnet. Derek was impressed, but still had a niggling doubt. Assume you're going to use a magnet to fool the compass next to the helmsman. Reg winked and nodded as Derek continued. Is the magnet strong enough? Reg smiled his wolfish grin for a second time. Adam, please turn around. Why? Said Derek. Please. Derek turned around and Reg rubbed the magnet up and down his back. What on earth are you doing? Said Barry, charging the magnet with Derek's magnetic personality. It wasn't meant to be a joke, but with the adrenaline running high, everyone except Reg burst out laughing. Nice one, Reg, Stan said through a flurry of girly giggles. The name is Steve, Reg replied in a deadpan voice, and I was not making a joke. Team Cogs and Clocks quieted down, and all eyes turned to Reg, except for Stan, who was back swinging on a beam. Reg stared into the hopeful eyes of his teammates. Have faith. We have faith. Bloody hell, Reg, or Steve. I mean, give us a clue, Austin said as the others nodded in agreement. Reg paused, mainly for dramatic effect, and then replied calmly, Who is up on the top deck in disguise? And like a fruit machine dropping its jacket pot, a waterfall of pennies suddenly dropped, followed by a late tinkle from someone who was a couple of seconds behind. Zodiac, cried Barry. Exactly, Reg replied. Derek was mystified. Before Reg had been hit on the head, his sole contribution to most of the team's discussions had been a long howl, followed by many random comments. Now, here he was with a near-perfect plan to save their race. Derek smiled and wondered if they could keep this new version of Reg, without the daft names, of course. And he then considered the name Adam, quickly rejecting it like it was the first solid meal. Adam, he muttered to himself. A voice from above crashed into his thoughts, bringing him back to the present. So what's with the ropes nailed to the rudder post, Dan said. That, my dear Stanley, is how we will take over the navigation controls. How? We have Mark, said Reg. And when exactly do we put this plan into action, Derek asked. Reg looked around at his teammates and smiled. We go live tonight. On board the LS Splinter, the afternoon entertainment was in full swing, and Morris Hammer was enjoying the show. His huge forehead wrinkled as he searched to find the appropriate words to describe the performance in front of him, finally concluding, it's good. The spectacle he was witnessing was an outstanding production of action, drama, and emotion. The lead character, Clayton Sneer, was a perfect antagonist, tossing chairs and swearing heavily at his co-stars. The emotion-filled act was one of pure brilliance, Clayton's dirty, ripped cycling attire matching perfectly his ranting, sniveling character. Surely Morris thought, worthy of an Oscar for Best Costume. Morris especially enjoyed a crucial scene that involved Wilson Wehrlot rising to oppose Clayton only for the frothing madman to launch a table at him. The central character was stealing the production. No matter how hard his co-stars tried to raise their game, this was a one-man show. By the end of the performance, the lead had put so much effort into his role that his voice had become croaky. In the final scene, a member of the audience was invited to participate. Morris, being the only attendee, volunteered to rescue Daniel Drift from Clayton, who was holding the edge of a table against his throat, cutting off vital oxygen. A giant hand grabbed Clayton around his throat and lifted him off the ground. Daniel Drift coughed and spluttered, and then, when the pressure of the table was relieved. And as the curtain fell, Clayton Sneer was hauled off the stage and thrown straight into a cell to await the sentence and the critics' reviews. Under a little wooden shelter in front of the poop deck on the LS Potato Pie, trainee helmsman and pirate Univon Steelet was happily steering the ship, keeping a keen eye on the navigation compass and making any necessary adjustments as the sun made its merry way up into the crisp blue sky. A crow appeared and flapped around the deck for a couple of seconds, landing on a perch next to the ship's wheel. Univon untied a message from around its leg, read it, and rang a bell. Moments later, Captain Tinfoil appeared with Dario perched on his shoulder. The angry-looking duck gave Univon a disapproving quack. This had better be good, the captain growled. Univon handed the note to the Captain Tinfoil, who shivered as he read the message from Buck's Wad. All expression draining from his face as he realized his time was up. And as he walked out from under the shelter, Dario pecked Univon's head very hard. Univon sighed and rubbed his sore head. He wondered why he had signed up for a life as a sea pirate. His mother hadn't been keen. She had wanted him to join the land pirates in the sands of the forgotten. But he had a curiosity and a love for the ocean that she couldn't quash. For the next 12 hours, Univon watched the sun as it arced across the sky and sank over the opposite side of the ship. Surely his pirate contract entitled him to some form of meal break, he thought. The last strands of light evaporated and a veil of darkness drifted down onto the LS Potato Pie. Waiting at the top of the tight vertical conduit, Reg listened for any sounds. He could only hope that Zodiac was still on the deck disguised as a pirate. His plan depended on it. After a couple of minutes, he inched the panel up and scanned the deck. At the far side of the wooden deck, a figure was slumped across the barrel. Reg watched it intently to see if it moved. Once satisfied the coast was clear, the non-howling entity crawled out of the small hatch, replaced it, and slipped behind some crates. He peeped out and observed the prone figure whose head was enveloped in a large hat. He had no idea if it was Zodiac or not. After waiting several more minutes in the hope that the pirate would shuffle around and reveal his or even her face, Reg took a deep breath, lowered himself onto the rough wooden deck, and slithered out from the stacked crates. As his head poked around the bottom of the wooden boxes, he froze in fear when a hand latched onto his left ankle. Shh! Reg turned around, terror filling his soul, only to be replaced by anger at the thought of being caught. His heart was beating like a teenage lad who had just seen his girlfriend's underwear. He looked up at the shadowy figure holding his leg. His eyes settling on the oversized hat, the pirate pulled him back behind the crooks, let go of his leg, and slowly pushed up his hat. Red Jones collapsed with relief. "Zodiac?" he whispered. Zodiac nodded, scanning the area. "If you're here, then who is that over there?" Reg pointed at the slumped pirate. "My cover will not last much longer. I had to knock him out as he was asking too many awkward questions. Sooner or later, somebody is going to realize that there is a missing pirate, and an unconscious one." Reg sat up and reached into his pocket. "Do not worry, my plan is almost ready. I need you to do one last thing for us, and then you can slip back into your room." Zodiac raised his eyebrow and stared at Reg. Gone was the howling and the random comments, now replaced by this reasonably intelligent man in front of him who was planning to save their race. He had been mesmerized by Reg when he was more than a little odd, and now he was in complete awe of his clever thinking. He continued to stare at Reg, open-mouthed, shaking his head in an effort to bring himself back to the present. He looked down at the small magnet in Reg's hand. "What's that for?" Reg smiled. "It's a charged magnet. Hopefully it will fool the ship's compass. I need you to gain entrance to the helmsman's shelter and place the magnet under the compass at a specific point to alter the readings." "Right," said Zodiac, his eyes fixed on the new incarnation of Reg before him. "We'll then manipulate the rudder post using the Bernard's strength and Austin's GPS. So to conclude," said Zodiac, "the magnet will alter the compass, and the helmsman will still think we're on the course for Yellowstone Port, when really we are heading to Mother's Landing." Reg nodded. "Yes, that's correct, Zodiac." Zodiac fell silent and smiled. "A million years," and he almost qualified. "Was there ever an oddball quite like Reg?" "Reg," he whispered. "That's brilliant, just brilliant." Reg frowned. "Thank you, but for the love of God, for the love of a good kebab, my name is Steve." "Oh, sorry." "I'm not Gimli, you know," moaned Bernard, who was sitting on the tight conduit just above the tiller with a rope slung over each of his broad shoulders. "Who?" said Barry. "Gimli, the strong dwarf from Lord of the Rings." Barry, uncultured in the world of films, screwed up his face as he tried to think of who he was. "Never heard of him." Bernard sighed and shuffled into a more comfortable position. Barry was supposed to be helping, but he just farted. "You'll be fine," Barry assured him and patted him on his shoulder. He then farted again and left to find Austin, who was to provide navigational instructions. With Bernard and Austin in position, Reg dropped out of the hole and fell on the floor, passing Stan, who was still hanging out about in the rafters. Derek peered by his side. "Colin has jammed the door just in case someone checks up on us." Reg nodded. "You mean Paul?" Yeah, Paul. "Once we receive a signal from Zodiac, we'll be ready to go." Derek nodded and watched as Reg sat down on his bunk and waited. Only a few days earlier, Reg had been howling at people and asking random questions. Even though he quite liked this new, relatively intelligent Reg, he was starting to miss the original howling crazy Reg, and more importantly, he wanted his command back. The novelty was starting to wear thin. Under the cover of darkness, Zodiac crept towards the helmsman's shelter, tiptoed to the side of it, and laid down on the deck. Pulling a long tarpaulin over himself, he lay motionless, listening and waiting for his moment to make the move. He could hear Univon steal it at his usual post during the ship. But there was an added complication. Zodiac could hear the tones of Captain Tinfoil. "Keep her steady, lad." "Aye, aye, Captain." Univon was a little uneasy. Captain Tinfoil never came up to the bridge on the night shift. Something had to be wrong. and clearly the captain was taking no chances. Tinfoil looked out across the darkness of the ship and tilted his head. The gentle lapping of waves across the side of the ship filled the night air. Satisfied that all was well, he turned to the little hob in the corner of the bridge and made himself a hot cup of coffee. Seeing Captain Tinfoil's back was turned, Zodiac saluted out from under the shelter, grabbed Univon, and clasped his hand over his mouth. "Turn around, close your eyes, and don't utter a single word, or I'll cut your throat," hissed Zodiac. The trainee pirate gulped and started shaking as he turned away. Zodiac reached under the compass, attached the magnet, and checked that the needle was showing a false reading. All they had to do now was inform Reg that the magnet was in place, and when Austin had them on the right course, the compass should show them still heading for Yellowstone Port. "Reg, if this works, you're a genius," thought Zodiac. He turned to Univon. "I was never here," he whispered in his ears and slipped back into the darkness. Captain Tinfoil, nursing a steaming hot cup of coffee, turned around to the helm and a shell-shocked Univon. A shiver ran down his spine, and for a second time he had a strange feeling of another presence. "Are you all right, me hearty?" He surveyed the area while Dario slept on his shoulder. "Aye, aye, Captain," said Univon, who had turned a whiter shade of pale, the threat from Zodiac still bouncing around inside his head. Captain Tinfoil sat down on a box and slurped his coffee. His mind was on fire. There was something bothering him, and he just couldn't fathom what it was. Okay, next we've got Chapter 17, and that is it for this for the pirate section, I think. Let me see. Chapter 18 is cleared for takeoff. So, yeah, I think that's it. We'll do Chapter 17 the next few days. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you joining me for the stories from Steve Wolf's Legend Creation, The Tour to Ledge. I hope you're enjoying these. I know I am. I apologize if I'm laughing during reading these, but I can't help it. It's just one of my favorite books of all time. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you had a good time. Hope to see you again on the next reading. Do me a favor, look at the other videos that we've got on this channel. There's some from my books, some from Steve, some other ones from Steve's. I've got some books in there from a few different authors. So, take a look at Joe's Journey or A Lady Came Knocking, or I'll have to see what else I've got on here. I forget. Been doing this now for 3 years and still doing it. We'll continue to do it so long as I keep getting stories that I've written or ones that my friends have. So I look forward to seeing you again in another few days. Thank you for visiting, and you have a good day, and take care of yourself. Bye.